Hello guys, welcome back to my channel When Humanities is Life. In this video, I will be starting with the first chapter of Political Science Class 12 in Term 2. This chapter is on parties and party system, and you won't find a name in the book and there are confusions regarding it. Well, this is a chapter which comprises of two different chapters. Chapter 2, Era of One Party Dominance, and Chapter 6, Challenges and Restoration to the Congress System. So let's start. The focus of this chapter is between 1952 and 1967. This phase is called the Congress system. You will know why. In this phase, there was only one party which managed to get the votes of most of the people in India. It was the Congress Party, the Indian National Congress. India was one of those several developing countries which attained independence from British colonial rule. And it was during this time that many other countries also gained independence. Many of these developing countries experienced non democratic rule because the leaders of such countries claimed that national unity was their main priority than democracy. They were afraid of all those different views that might lead to conflict in a democracy. But in India, our leaders took the more difficult path. Any other path would have been surprising because our freedom struggle of India, obviously, was deeply committed to the idea of democracy. They took the more difficult path. They adopted democracy no matter what. Politics in any country involves struggle for power, but in any democracy, we have to have fair politics in which the interest of the public interest, should always be kept in mind. That is what has been inherent in the politics of India. Still now, we attained independence in 1947, and these 3 years from 1947 to 1950, the country was ruled by an interim government. Interim government, as in a government which is not elected by people on the basis of universal adult franchise. No, all adults didn't vote to form that government. Those leaders were very popular, let me tell you, like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and so on. They framed our constitution. They commanded huge public support and respect, but they were not elected democratically, as in they were not voted for. Now they laid down the rules of the constitution. The constitution were a set of rules. Okay, it was adopted on 26th November 1949. It was signed on 24th January 1950, and it came into effect on 26th January 1950. These are the details. Facts enrich our answers, but you must clarify your concepts that will help you to write your answers. And in the second term, we have a subjective examination where we are going to write it. So the concepts must be clear. Moving on, we had our first general election in 1952. It was a very complicated process. Now, why are we having elections at all? As I said, that the first thing that the leaders faced was the challenge of building democracy. And what is democracy? Democracy basically means adopting a set of rules that will favor the people. The people are the main agents of bringing transformation in the society. They are the main voices. Everything happens for us. That's it. We know that. Now, how will we express what we want? It is through the election. So, the first general election took place in 1952. Now we come to the election procedure. Now, any election, till now, we have so many elections. What happens in all these things? All these elections. First of all, a list of all of us, the list of the citizens are created. This is the electoral roll. Okay, then what happened? Back then in 1952, it was discovered that there are a lot of flaws, a lot of mistakes in the electoral roll. For example, the names of 40 lakh women were not recorded. They were simply recorded as daughter of, wife of, and the election commission, which was formed to supervise the entire election process, it refused to accept such vague things. As a result, the electoral roll got revised. Alright, the preparation of the rolls was a mammoth task, and at that time, there were 17 crore eligible voters, and they were to elect 3,200 MLAs or member of legislative assemblies, of course at the state level, and 489 members of the Lok Sabha at the center. Now 15% of the voters, the ones who were about to vote, they were illiterate. I'm so sorry, 15% of the voters were literate, and the rest of all of those were illiterate. I'm so sorry, 15% were literate. And about 3 lakh officers and staffs, they were trained to supervise the election process. Okay, now what? The first election commission was formed in 1950, as we discussed earlier, and the first chief election commissioner, in short I've written CEC, it's the chief election commissioner, was Sukumar Sen. This election was a big test of democracy. Back then, it was believed that democracy can only be practiced in the more prosperous countries of the world, like in Europe and North America, but definitely not in India, which was just a developing country. Let's see what India did. India comprised of people who were illiterate. So many people were illiterate, and it was a very poor country. Economy was, in a kind of a loggerhead situation with so many military uh, issues going on around India with neighbors. Right now, India got freedom from the British. The universal adult franchise in India, an Indian editor stated, was the biggest gambling in history. So it's a very vague thing they claimed. They were not in support of India's adoption of democracy and voting. Many individuals, many agents, many forces opposed India's stance of conducting election on the basis of an universal adult franchise, like Organizer, a magazine. It wrote that India will never be able to, conduct election in a smooth way. The exact thing that it stated was that Jawaharlal Nehru, the Prime Minister, would live to confess the failure of, in universal adult franchise in India, something like this. Okay, so you must remember these names. Then one of the British members of the Indian Civil Services, he claimed that a more enlightened age would live to see the absurd face of recording the votes of millions of illiterate people. So all of them, they just kind of opposed it. They kind of said that it is a very funny thing that you were trying to do it. But, the Indian people proved all of them wrong. We will see how. But nevertheless, the entire thing was extremely mammoth. The election has had to be postponed twice. Finally, it was held from October 1951 to February 1952, and this election is largely referred to as the 1952 general election. Now, the election was very competitive, and on the day of the election, more than half of the eligible voters, they appeared to vote. The level of participation was also encouraging, and the results of the election was even accepted by the ones who lost the election. So, the election, the Indian people and how they conducted themselves in the election, they proved all the critics wrong. And this election of 1952 is claimed to be a landmark in the history of democracy. I wrote it here, landmark in the history of democracy, the 1952 general election. We move on to the next section, Congress dominance in the first three general elections. We won't be surprised if we find out that the Congress Party, Indian National Congress, was the winner of the first general election. And so it maintained its position for many years too, let me tell you. Now, Jawaharlal Nehru, as many expected, he was the first Prime Minister. He was a charismatic leader, and he campaigned all over the country. The Congress Party won as many as 364 out of 489 seats. Try to remember this fact. The Congress Party won 364 out of 489 seats. And which was the party that came second? Well, the Communist Party of India, it came second. It won 16 seats. In the state too, Congress had a big victory, except for certain states. Let us see: Travancore, Cochin, Madras, and Orissa. These were the states where Congress could not win. But both at the national and the state level, by and large, Congress had a major victory. As I said, Congress maintained this position for a long time. From 1952, 1957, 1962, Congress maintained the same position. It won three-fourths of the seats throughout these years. At the state level in 1952, Congress lost only in Kerala. In Kerala, a coalition of the Communist Party won in 1957. Alright, apart from support from people, there were other reasons why Congress won such a huge majority. Let us see what. Congress could manage to secure so much of the votes because of the system of our election. We follow the FPTP system. Okay, the first past the post system. This is also called an artificial victory. Okay, what happened in 1952? The Congress party, it got 45% of the votes, but the seats it acquired was nearly 74% and it ranked first. In terms of votes, the next party was Socialist Party. It managed to get 10% of the votes and acquired 3% of the seats, and it ranked second. Now, guys, don't be confused. The Communist Party came second in terms of seats. It won 16 seats. Alright. But the Socialist Party came second in terms of votes. It got 10% of the votes, but the seats it acquired was 3%. Now, what happens in FPTP system? You have read about in the past year. FPTP system as opposed to the plurality system. You can write the name of the formal name of the plurality system in the comments if you can. Please do. So what happens in the FPTP system? The party that gets more votes than all other parties, it gets much more than its proportion of seats. So this system gets some additional seats, some additional votes to the party that gets more votes than most other parties. So if we add the votes of non-Congress candidates, it was more than the votes of the Congress. But the non-Congress votes were divided among various rivals. Okay. For example, hypothetically, let us assume that the Congress party gets 100 votes. Okay, the Communist Party gets 50 votes, Socialist Party gets 50 votes, and other parties get 25 votes. Now, Congress has got 100. If we add up the votes of the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, and the other parties, it becomes 125, which is more than the 100 votes of the Congress. But see, the other votes, the 125 votes, are divided among the different parties. So, the Congress becomes the winner, and it also gets some additional seats because of our FPTP system. The Congress Party gets an artificial victory. Alright, now we come to communist victory in Kerala. It's there in the box. What happened in 1957? The Congress Party lost and the Communist Party of Kerala won with the largest share of seats. How much? 60 out of 126 seats was won by the Communist Party of Kerala. EMS Namboodiripad, he was the Communist Party leader. He became the Chief Minister of Kerala. For the first time in history, the Communist Party, a Communist Party in the world, came to power through democratic election. This is a huge thing, guys. The communist, you must have heard about communism and socialism in the book on world politics. It was the ideology of the USSR. But you know what happened? No communist party ever came into power through democratic means. It was only in Kerala for the first time that a communist party won democratically. This is remembered throughout the world. Now, how did the Congress react to this communist victory? Well, it led a liberation struggle against the Communist Party because of its radical and progressive measure. Obviously, many people questioned this move of Congress, and it was evidently based on its wish to control Kerala. But the Congress finally dismissed the Communist Party in Kerala under Article 356, which is the emergency provision, the state emergency. We also have heard about Article 350, Article 352 dealing with national and financial emergency. Okay. In 1959, this emergency was declared, and this is known as the first cited misuse of emergency power by the center. There are many more examples, and we'll learn about it definitely in the next chapters, democratic resurgence and all that under Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Next, we come to the Socialist Party, which is also there in a yellow box, okay, in a page. Well, the origin of the Socialist Party was inside the Congress during the pre independence period. It was formed by a group of young leaders in 1934. In 1948, Congress amended its constitution, which prevented the members from having dual party memberships. If a member is the party of the Congress, it cannot be the member of another party. Because of this 1948 amendment, the new Socialist Party was formed in 1948. The ideology of the Socialist Party, it is based on democracy, socialism. They criticize the Congress for favoring the capitalism and landlords. And because of various splits and reunions, many other parties like Kisan Mazdoor Party, Praja Socialist Party, Samyukta Socialist Party it came into existence. And various prominent leaders like Jaiprakash Narayan, Ashok Mehta, Ram Manohar Lohia, S.M. Joshi. Okay, all of these individuals have been the prominent leaders of the Socialist Party. Then the Samajwadi Party and the Janata Dal. These parties these parties originated from the Socialist Party. Well, the Congress was the dominant party in the first few elections. It was for many years the Congress was the only party that could win majority. Alright, but the thing is that we need to understand the difference between the emergence of Congress as the winner in India and the emergence of other parties in other countries which emerged as the winner in a non-democratic way. Now, many countries had one party dominance, but it was by sacrificing democracy. It was not in accordance with democracy. And this was different from what we had in India. What happened in China, Cuba, and Syria, the constitution formally permits only one party. In Myanmar, Belarus, Egypt, Eritrea, only one party manages to win elections after election because of military means. In Mexico, South Korea, Taiwan, one party has existed for years. There is no constitution that states that there has to be one party in these countries, Mexico, South Korea, Taiwan, but effectively one party manages to win, obviously by non-democratic ways. But in India, what happens? There are a number of other opposition parties, but Congress manages to win because people are in favor of Congress. Okay. So in India, there has been one party dominance under free and fair elections. There has been many opposition parties. A similar example we can find in the international context where the African National Congress has won under free and fair condition in South Africa after the collapse of the apartheid regime. Alright? You must be wondering how Congress managed to win so much of support throughout the country. Well, this was because Congress inherited the legacy of the national movement and it had a perennially inclusive structure. This led to the victory of the Congress. First of all, it was the inheritor of the legacy of the national movement and it had an inclusive approach. It was a well organized party. It existed from the local level to the central level. This was the first point. And the second is that it has the first of the bloc advantage. It was formed long back. In 1947, many of the political parties that contested against Congress in the elections from 1952, it was the first time that it was being formed. But Congress, in fact, it was formed a long time back in 1885. As a result, it had the first of the bloc advantage. It existed for a long time and its existence was there at the national level and also at the local level, at the district and even lower levels. And it was all inclusive. All views, all kinds of opinions had a place in Congress because different people from different socioeconomic status, different backgrounds, different linguistic backgrounds, all of them joined Congress. Now, it was founded in 1885 as a pressure group. It was an elite group actually of English speaking Indians. It was formed to oppose the British with the intention to attain Indian independence. It was formed by a British, Alan Octavian Hume. Now, he included the students of Calcutta University who were diligent, upper class, English speaking leaders to discuss social and political issues. And back then, as I said, it was an elite party. It included the upper middle class, urban elite, and the English speaking individuals. But slowly, after each civil disobedience movement, the social base of Congress widened, and it slowly encompassed different classes of people, ranging from industrialists to urban dwellers, from villagers to workers, from owners of land to peasants and farmers. Entry of these classes resulted in a social coalition. And by independence in 1947, Congress became a rainbow like coalition. It came to represent India's diversity in terms of class, caste, religion, language, and various other interests. And it also became a social and ideological coalition. We know why it's a social coalition, because it comprised of all the different people. Okay, but why was it an ideological coalition? It was an ideological coalition because different beliefs existed within Congress. It accommodated the revolutionary and the pacifist. It accommodated the conservative and the radical, the extremist and the moderate, the left and also the right. Okay, revolutionary is the one who wants immediate change. Pacifist wants more slow change. Conservative are the ones who it's almost similar to that of the pacifist. They are a little slow. They believe in holding on to older values, and the radical are the ones who want to attain rapid progress. The extremists are the ones who believe in a kind of victory by force, and the moderate are the ones who believe in peace, orientation, and all the rest of it. Left and right, we have read about it in chapter 3 of the Indian politics book. The left are the group of people who are in favor of the poor, the downtrodden. They are in favor of the policies and principles that favor the poor. And the right are the ones who believe in free competition, free market economy, and all the rest of it. You know all these things. Before independence, Congress was a platform to voice the views on Indian independence. Many parties with their own structure, constitution, and organizations were allowed to exist within the Congress. For example, the Congress Socialist Party was formed, which later transformed into an opposition. Though it was a party which existed within the Congress before independence and after independence for some days, and it's an example where Congress consisted of different parties. It contained different parties, and discussions and consensus was arrived at through discussion and all the rest of it. This tolerance and inclusiveness of Congress, it made the party so popular among the masses of the Indian people, even after independence, so many years after independence, in fact. Now we move to the next part, tolerance and management of factions. Well, we know that Congress transformed into a social and ideological coalition. What is a coalition? Coalition accommodates all those who join it. It's a group actually. Here, decisions are taken with compromise and consensus and discussions. It's the hallmark of a coalition is inclusiveness, and it accommodated all those who joined it. This strategy of tolerance and management of various ambitions was adopted during the freedom struggle. Whatever the opposition said, it had a room in the Congress. Now, this is the interesting thing. This is very interesting about the policies that Congress adopted. Okay, let us look at what a faction was. A faction is a group inside a party. If a group was unhappy with the position of the party or with its share of power within the party, it would remain inside the party and it will fight for its authority and power. The other groups will also fight with that particular group, and all these groups won't leave the party, which we now call defection. They won't defect, rather, they will stay in the party and they will fight each other for their power. What are the reasons for the growth of different factions? First of all, internal weaknesses of the party. There are various views, rivalry between different factions or groups, and personal ambitions. Now, these things will occur in a party. This will happen in politics. Important is that we must keep in mind the the spirit of unity, which is slowly being lost. Now, factions, it gave an unusual strength to the Congress and helped them win in most of the states. I already said that it was not that Congress was the only party. Indian politics is always characterized by a vibrant group of opposition parties. There are vast numbers of opposition parties. Now, all the non-Congress parties today has their origin in the oppositions of the 1950s. And what are the advantages of having so many oppositions? First of all, each of these opposition parties had a token representation in the parliament. They managed to maintain the democratic character of India's politics. It criticized Congress, and this is a very crucial role. The opposition party always keep the ruling party under check. The Congress will know, any ruling party would know that if I do something wrong, the opposition is there to criticize me. So it will be careful in abusing power. And it prevents the government from becoming anti-democratic. From becoming anti-democratic. Alright, now, the first phase of Indian politics, opposition and ruling party leaders at this time had healthy relations. They respected each other. For example, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Shama Prasad Mukherjee, these were the leaders of the opposition, and they had a very cordial relationship with the Congress, with the ruling party. Jawaharlal Nehru himself invited opposition party leader Jayaprakash Narayan to form the government with him. Now, the thing is that how did the Congress dominance end? Well, as the Congress base narrowed, the opposition grew in significance, and hence the dominance of Congress also declined. What happened previously, it was all inclusive, there were many people in it, different views had a place in Congress, but slowly the base of Congress narrowed. Different people left Congress and joined opposition, as it is said in history too that nothing is permanent. No empire, no matter how large it is, how big it will never last forever. Similarly, Congress, no matter how big a party it was, at the eve of India's independence or in the subsequent years right after India's independence, slowly the base narrowed and the opposition parties grew in significance. Different people started leaving Congress, and slowly the dominance of Congress, it declined. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for seeing the video. Please share my video with your friends, and please subscribe to my channel. That will help me a lot. And if you want anything else, please feel free to comment. I will definitely make a video on whatever you want. Thank you so much. Meet you in the next video, the part 2 of this chapter.